Landing on the back is a methodical intermediate step for many jumps in the discipline, making it an important element of techniques that are introduced at a later stage. For this reason, special care must be taken to issue technically correct instructions at the outset. In everyday scenarios, no one would voluntarily allow themselves to fall onto their back from a great height. This is why most beginners approach the backdrop with a sense of fear, and misjudged reactions should be expected. Prerequisites for this jump are a good sense of the trampoline bed and strength in the muscles of the neck and hips. Arms are extended upwards for the takeoff. Hips are pushed upwards. The legs are closed immediately after takeoff, the feet extended. The body is slightly overextended in the climbing phase. The arms are retained in an extended position close against the head. The body turns backwards. At the upper reverse point, the body has completed slightly less than a quarter somersault turn. The body extension is, according to jump height, incorporated into the downwards movement. Shortly before the landing, the hips are bent with the back held straight, the arms are stretched out and lowered in front of the body. Arms and legs are almost vertical on landing. The head is slightly raised. As the trampoline bed is pushed down, the hips sink slightly lower than the shoulders. The angle between hips and thighs must be reduced to less than 90 degrees so that they remain in the vertical position. With respect to the more difficult jumps from the back position with many somersault rotations, the variation with the head in the trampoline bed is most common. Instead of bringing the chin down to the chest for landing, the back of the head is placed on the trampoline bed. The danger with beginners is that when they stand up, they throw their head backwards. In order to generate a sense of the extended body posture during the jump, it's tried out in a reclining position on a push-in mat. The pelvis is slightly raised. The arms lie stretched over the head on the mat. The legs are tightly closed. The arms must be positioned right up against the head. Jumping onto the back from the standing position means overcoming a number of hindrances. Usually, during the first attempts, the hips are bent and too little rotation is incorporated. The landing position on the trampoline bed has to be explained to the participant who adopts it on the push-in mat. According to the preferred variation, care must be taken to ensure that the head is either raised or lying on the trampoline bed. Landing with angled hips can then be attempted. The participant must ensure that the rotation has sufficient impetus. The jump to the floor can be practiced with a very soft floor mat. Both variations, the extended and angled landing position, are very similar to each other during the first part of the jump. The differences only become apparent during the downward movement. So that when the participant is angling the hips, he does not lose that sense of an upward push of the hips in the first part of the jump, both variations can initially be practiced alternately. Once the takeoff from the push-in mat is under control, the mat is inserted from the side. After several secure attempts, the mat is only used on spec. This requires a good eye and reaction from the instructor. The fear of falling backwards is dealt with by setting up the seat drop from behind. First, the participant practices bouncing in the back position. This technique requires a great deal of practice and good stomach muscles. As long as the exercise is not stable, only small jump heights are attained. The danger of injury is very slight. Once the back bouncing is under control, the participant can try to stand up. A soft floor mat can serve as a material aid. But the participant can also jump to the feet without help. Participants soon develop a sense of what it's like to land on the back. Most participants gradually find the courage to jump onto the back. Immediate corrective work must take place to ensure the execution is accurate. Bouncing on the back as a warm-up exercise for the backdrop must function flawlessly. Most beginners allow the lower leg to fall upon landing, which leads to a forward rotation and causes the participant to land more on the pelvis or even in a sitting position. The movement must be intensively practiced, as it can later serve as a technical aid. A backward rotation can be very easily generated by pushing the shoulders back. The participant loses height and lands behind the takeoff point. To avoid this, the instructor issues the command, "Push your stomach up towards the ceiling," or as an overcorrection, jump the backdrop forwards. An effective method is to restrict the landing area by not allowing the participant to take off from the middle of the trampoline bed, but rather with the back closer to the safety mat. The sloping position before the jump has a similar effect to pushing back the shoulders. If the participant jumps forwards during the last straight jump, he finds himself in a backward position and is thrown up by the bed to the back. Even if the feet are only slightly offset forwards, the effects are very clear. The landing is again behind the takeoff point, the loss in height not so pronounced. Because the backdrop is not something that can be viewed as a routine movement, many participants are afraid to let themselves fall on their backs. For this reason, the takeoff is decelerated, resulting in a loss of height. The problem can be solved by a large number of repetitions. Practicing from a standing position can help to intensify the takeoff movement. A beginner is initially unable to estimate how much rotation he requires for a good backdrop. So as not to over-rotate and land on his neck, he usually turns with too little momentum. Instinctively, the hips are bent too early to obtain sufficient rotation for a good landing. Just how much momentum is required is something that must be learned by numerous repetitions of the exercise. Instructors must repeatedly remind participants to carry out a long extension in the first part of the jump. Awareness of this long extension can be generated by practicing the extended back position on a push-in mat. During the learning phase, participants often do not pay attention to their leg posture. This leads to the participant simply letting them fall during landing, thereby preventing a good follow-on jump. Often, a corrective instruction suffices, but sometimes a special exercise to generate awareness of leg posture can be helpful. The participant conducts a backdrop and tries immediately to land on the back a second time. This only works if the legs are held in a vertical position during the first landing on the back. The legs cannot be held up if the participant lands first with the buttocks or the pelvis. A landing of this nature is caused by too little somersault momentum. The pushing up of the hips must be improved. This may require instruction. Many repetitions are necessary. The extended body posture can also be improved here by a backdrop with extended landing on the push-in mat. Through alternating landings in extended and angled back positions, a feeling is developed for the differing amounts of momentum required. Learning the backdrop is inextricably bound up with learning the jump to feet. Learning the basic form of this jump is very easy, but a technically clean execution is not. But a clean technique is very important for jumps that will be mastered later. In the back position, the legs are almost vertical. The arms are parallel to the legs. The head is, according to technique, raised or lying on the trampoline bed. When the bed is pushed down, the hip angle is slightly reduced. At the end of the upwards movement of the bed, the hips are extended. The arms continue to point up towards the ceiling by opening the angle between the body and the arms. The shoulders and back of the head are the last parts of the body to leave the bed. The hips are completely stretched shortly after leaving the bed. The arms are at the same time placed above the head. The head is straight. This initiates a forward rotation. The extension is maintained in this position until shortly before landing, when the knees and hips are bent for landing. The landing is executed with arms straight above the head. The rotation required for the jump to feet is initiated by a powerful swing and stop of the legs from the back position. If there is no swing and stop of the legs, this could be caused by a flawed landing on the back or the wrong timing. Many repetitions are necessary here. If the swing and stop of the legs is too weak, this will also prevent the correct execution of a jump to feet. The error can be corrected by the instruction to perform a powerful push-off with the shoulders, or by practicing gymnastic tipping movements on the floor or other apparatus. If the timing of a swing and stop of the legs is wrong, this can have exactly the opposite effect. If it's initiated too early, the participant rotates too far and over-twists. Falling forwards is not without risk, as landing with the hands on bed can lead to injury. The instruction can be issued here to look over the feet up to the ceiling while landing on the back, and then to push the feet upwards towards the ceiling. A powerful propulsion can be forced by reducing the height of the backdrop jump. This is the case when bouncing on the back. The participant must attain rotation and jump height through the propulsion. With a double back landing, the participant can be forced to hold the legs during the landing on the back. Intensive practice soon pays off. If the previous backdrop has too little rotation, the legs are not vertical on landing, but too flat. They cannot usually be held for sufficient time in this position, and the body is then thrown into a forward rotation. The backdrop must be improved in this case. Uncertainty leads some participants to draw up the legs before the landing. As confidence increases, they can concentrate more on the leg posture, but they must be repeatedly reminded of this until it's automatic. In comparison to the jump to feet from the back, the half twist to feet is easier to perform. Problems regulating the momentum are easier to address. A prerequisite for the jump is a good backdrop and the jump to feet from the back. As the bed is pushed down to its lowest point, the legs are vertical, the arms parallel to the legs. According to technique, the head is raised or lying on the bed. The body posture does not change significantly during the upward movement. The hips are suddenly extended shortly before leaving the bed. The last parts of the body to leave the bed are the shoulders and head, which initiates a forward rotation. The body is completely extended in the climbing phase. The head is straight. The arms are raised vertically above the head. The body straightens up. Body posture is maintained until shortly before landing, when the hips and knees are bent. The variation with arms down at the sides is also widely practiced. Changing the posture of the arms can result in technical errors occurring when learning other jumps at a later stage. The jump is usually mastered in its entirety, but if problems do arise, the twist can be divided up into sections, beginning with an eighth twist, then a quarter twist, then 3/8 of a twist, and finally the half twist. If the hips are not extended, participants often help themselves by allowing themselves to tip over to the side without an extension. This means the landing takes place on the edge of the bed. An early hip extension must be practiced, then viewed from the longitudinal direction. The jump remains in the center of the bed. Learning the jump in sections can be a helpful method here. If the hip extension is too weak or is carried out too late, the momentum will not be sufficient to bring the upper body into the vertical position. This means the participant lands in a forward position after the twist. Improving the jump to feet without a twist generates a greater feeling for the push-off from the back and thereby also helps improve the jump with half twist. In the case of too many somersault rotations caused by an overpowerful but mostly simply too early push-off from the bed, the upper body tips past the vertical position so that after the half twist, the participant lands on his back or even falls backwards. This situation also requires work on regulating momentum with a great number of repetitions. If the half twist is not completed, despite a good hip extension and good momentum regulation, it's usually due to the fact that the twist movement has been initiated too late. The right moment to push one side of the hips over into a twist direction is the push-off from the bed. A feeling for this usually comes after just a few attempts. Many participants try to compensate for their carelessness or incorrect momentum by bending their knees, for example, which is one of the most frequent errors. Participants can get used to the leg extension by way of many repetitions, and the instructor must always be on hand to draw attention to this important posture.